The Galactic Council's research vessel, Eternal Curiosity, hung in high orbit above Earth, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in ways that made it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. Inside, senior researcher Valera adjusted her atmospheric processors, her translucent tentacles rippling with barely contained frustration as she reviewed the latest data streams. Another anomaly, she announced to her research team, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with concern. These humans continue to defy conventional classification. The ship's primary research chamber was filled with holographic displays showing various aspects of human civilization. Each screen told a different story, and none of them made sense to the assembled researchers. They deliberately seek out dangerous situations for what they call entertainment, noted junior researcher Zix-427, his crystalline form vibrating with confusion. Yet they simultaneously display extreme caution over minimal threats. Look at this footage, a human approaching a small arachnid with terror, while another human willingly jumps from orbit with nothing but a primitive fabric device. Valera moved through the displays, her tentacles weaving complex patterns as she organized the data. The Galactic Council had sent them to evaluate whether humanity needed to be quarantined, a standard procedure for species that showed signs of being fundamentally unstable. But after 3 months of observation, they had more questions than answers. Their environmental adaptations make no sense, contributed Chief Biologist Care, his gelatinous form rippling as he spoke. They've colonized nearly every biome on their planet, from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts, yet they complain about minimal temperature variations. They can survive weeks without food but panic if their communication devices lose power for an hour. Valera paused at a particular display showing human medical facilities. Most puzzling is their response to damage. Their bodies are simultaneously fragile and remarkably resilient. They can recover from injuries that would be fatal to most species, yet they require constant maintenance and regular periods of unconsciousness. The research team had been chosen for this mission specifically because they represented some of the most stable and logical species in the galaxy. The crystalline collective, to which Zix-427 belonged, had evolved in the pristine order of geometric mineral formations. Valera's species had developed in the peaceful depths of gas giant oceans, where change happened over millennia. Care's people were the product of carefully controlled evolution in laboratory environments. Humans, by comparison, seemed to be walking contradictions. Perhaps, suggested Zix-427, we should proceed with the quarantine recommendation. Their unpredictability alone suggests they could be a danger to galactic stability. Valera was about to agree when a new alert flashed across their screens. She extended a tentacle to expand the notification, her bioluminescence shifting to a deeper shade of concern. It appears, she said slowly, that we have been detected. The impossible had happened, despite their advanced cloaking technology, despite choosing a position that should have been beyond Earth's detection capabilities. Somehow the humans had spotted them. And not only had they been detected, but a primitive Earth vessel was now approaching their position. Impossible. Zix-427's crystalline form chimed with disbelief. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They shouldn't even be able to see us, let alone reach this orbit. Yet the evidence was undeniable. A small craft, crude by their standards, was making its way toward them with surprising precision. More shocking was that it appeared to be a civilian vessel, not a military response as their protocols had predicted. They're hailing us, Care reported, his gelatinous form rippling with surprise. The signal is primitive, but clear. They're using a combination of mathematical sequences and what appears to be their primary visual entertainment frequency. Valera felt her tentacles curling with uncertainty. Nothing in their extensive preparation had covered this scenario. The humans were supposed to be decades away from this level of capability. Their carefully planned evaluation mission had just become a first contact situation. We have 3 options, she announced to her team. We can flee and recommend immediate quarantine based on this violation of our models. We can maintain position and ignore them, continuing our observation. Or, she paused, her bioluminescence pulsing with the radical nature of her next words, we can answer. The research chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them. Their mission had been to observe and evaluate, not to interact. Direct contact with an unproven species carried risks that could end careers, or worse, lives. The human vessel was now close enough that they could see it clearly through their sensors. It was a private research craft, its hull bearing the logos of something called SpaceX University Outreach Program. Its approach was steadier than should have been possible with Earth's current technology level. Valera made her decision. Prepare for Contact Protocol Alpha 7, she announced. But be ready for anything. These humans have already proven they don't follow our rules of possibility. As her team scrambled to prepare, she watched the approaching vessel with a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing unease. She had a feeling their real education about humanity was about to begin. The first thing Valera noticed about Dr. Sarah Chen was that the humans seemed utterly unimpressed by their advanced technology. While most species would have been awestruck by the crystalline architecture and quantum displays of the eternal curiosity, the Earth scientist was more interested in taking readings with her primitive devices. Fascinating absorption pattern in your hull structure, Dr. Chen muttered, adjusting what she called a spectroscope. The crystalline matrix must be engineered at the quantum level to achieve this kind of light manipulation. Zix 427 chimed in surprise. You understand our ship's construction? Oh, just the basics, Chen replied, not looking up from her instrument. We've been working on similar principles in our metamaterials lab, though obviously not at this scale. Would you mind if I took a few samples? Valera's tentacles twisted in confusion. This wasn't how first contact scenarios were supposed to proceed. Where was the religious awe? The technological intimidation? The human was treating their hyper-advanced research vessel like a mildly interesting laboratory specimen. Dr. Chen, Valera began carefully. Perhaps we should discuss how you managed to detect our presence. Our cloaking technology should have been beyond your current capabilities. Sarah finally looked up, pushing her glasses back up her nose. Oh, that was kind of an accident. We were testing a new type of quantum imaging system for dark matter detection when we noticed the gravitational lensing effect from your ship. Beautiful work on the mass distribution, by the way. The way you've handled the quantum uncertainty principles is really elegant. Care's gelatinous form rippled with disbelief. You were looking for dark matter. Your species shouldn't even have confirmed its existence yet. Well, technically we haven't published the confirmation paper yet, Chen admitted. Peer review is taking forever, but that's academia for you, right? The research team exchanged worried glances. Their careful evaluation of Earth's technological progress was proving to be drastically inaccurate. Either their intelligence was completely wrong, or a sudden alarm blared through the ship. Valera's bioluminescence flashed with concern as she accessed the alert. There's an approaching anomaly, she announced. Some kind of spatial distortion. Oh no. Chen's casual demeanor suddenly shifted to concern. What time is it? Earth time. 1447 UTC. Zix 427 provided. We need to move the ship. Now. The human's voice had lost all its previous academic curiosity. Our vessel is perfectly capable of handling any natural phenomena, Valera assured her, though something in the human's tone made her tentacles curl uneasily. This isn't natural. Chen was already moving toward their navigation controls. It's Wednesday. They always test the new drive systems on Wednesday afternoons, usually in high orbit, where they think it's empty space. Drive systems. Care's form wobbled with confusion. Your species is still using chemical propulsion. Well, officially yes. Chen was typing rapidly on her tablet, which had somehow interfaced with their systems despite the supposedly insurmountable technological gap. But the folks at the Breakthrough Lab have been experimenting with some interesting ideas about space-time manipulation. They're still working out the kinks. Before Valera could process the implications of that statement, space itself seemed to hiccup. The view screen showed a brief flash of something that their sensors couldn't quite interpret. When it cleared, a large portion of their supposedly indestructible crystalline hull had been transformed into what appeared to be strawberry pudding. Could have been worse, Chen commented, examining the pink goo with professional interest. Last week they accidentally turned a satellite inside out. Geometrically, I mean. It was really interesting from a topological perspective. Valera's tentacles were practically tied in knots. Your species is experimenting with fundamental forces of reality. For propulsion, well, how else are we going to reach other star systems? Chen asked, as if this was a perfectly reasonable approach to the problem. Chemical rockets would take forever, and we're kind of impatient. Speaking of which, she checked her tablet again. We should probably move about 3 kilometers to the left. They usually do at least 3 tests per session. The research team scrambled to comply, their carefully planned observation mission now completely derailed. As they maneuvered away from the test area, Valera noticed something even more disturbing. Their sensors were picking up dozens of similar experiments happening around the planet. Humans everywhere were poking at the fabric of reality, apparently just to see what would happen. Dr. Chen, Valera said carefully, our mission was to evaluate Earth for potential quarantine due to stability concerns. Oh. Chen looked up from where she was collecting samples of the pudding-transformed hull. How's that going? We're reconsidering our approach. Valera watched as another spatial distortion blossomed where their ship had been moments before. Though I'm no longer certain if we're qualified to contain your species. Contain? Chen laughed. Oh, that's funny. You know we've already sent probes to other dimensions, right? It was kind of an accident, but we got some interesting postcards. As if to punctuate her statement, another alarm began blaring. This time, the sensors were detecting what appeared to be a small tear in the quantum fabric of spacetime. And through it, impossibly, came a signal. Right on schedule, Chen smiled, pulling out what looked like an ancient radio receiver. That'll be the Thursday team. They work on quantum tunneling. Want to say hi? They're technically in next week, but the signal still comes through pretty clear. The Eternal Curiosity's research chamber had become an impromptu crisis center. Holographic displays showed a cascade of alerts, each more concerning than the last. Valera's tentacles writhed as she processed the incoming data, her bioluminescence pulsing with growing alarm. Let me understand this correctly, she addressed Dr. Chen, who was calmly sipping something called coffee from a container that seemed to violate several laws of thermodynamics. Your quantum tunneling experiments have accidentally created a cascade of temporal anomalies. Well, not accidentally, Chen corrected, adjusting her glasses. We knew this might happen. That's why we scheduled the tunneling tests for Thursday. Temporal anomalies on Thursdays are much easier to manage. Something about the quantum eigenvalues of weekday nomenclature. We wrote a paper on it. Zix 427's crystalline form vibrated with distress, but the anomalies are spreading. Our sensors indicate they're beginning to affect local spacetime stability. Oh, is that what those readings mean? Chen peered at their advanced displays. We've been measuring something similar, but our equipment kept turning into butterflies every time we got close to pinning down the numbers. Quite pretty, actually, but hard to calibrate. Valera watched in horror as another section of their sensor array transformed into a swarm of iridescent Lepidoptera. The butterflies, impossibly, began arranging themselves into complex mathematical equations before dissolving into quantum foam. The fundamental forces are becoming unstable. Care's gelatinous form rippled anxiously. Reality itself could unravel if this continues. Chen took another sip of her coffee, which was now glowing slightly and hovering above her cup. That could be inconvenient, though it might solve our rush hour traffic problems. This is not a time for humor. Valera's tentacles lashed out in frustration. Your species' reckless experiments have endangered the entire sector. "Oh, I'm not joking," Chen replied, pulling out her tablet. "Look at these readings from downtown Boston. The temporal distortions are actually improving traffic flow by allowing cars to quantum tunnel through congestion. The insurance companies are having fits about it, but commute times are down 23%. Before Valera could respond to this casual violation of causality, a new alert flashed across their screens. The temporal anomalies were beginning to merge, creating what their sensors described as a probability storm, a phenomenon that their most advanced theories had considered theoretically impossible. "Fascinating," Chen muttered, making notes. "The collapse of local determinism is creating some interesting patterns. Look at how the wave functions are braiding." Indeed, reality itself seemed to be forming complex knots around their ship. Time was flowing at different rates through different sections of the vessel. In one corridor, a dropped stylus was taking centuries to fall, while in another, entire civilizations were rising and falling in the space between milliseconds. "We need to stabilize the local space-time geometry," Valera announced, her scientific training kicking in despite her panic. "But our equipment wasn't designed to handle this level of temporal flux." "Oh, that's not a problem," Chen said, reaching into her bag. "We developed some tools for this kind of situation after the Parker Solar Probe accidentally created a time loop last year. Spent 3 weeks on a Tuesday before we sorted that one out." She pulled out what looked like a collection of spare parts, held together with something called duct tape. Valera's sensors couldn't even begin to analyze its composition. Every scan returned results in interpretive dance. "This is a quantum stability anchor," Chen explained, fiddling with what appeared to be a repurposed toaster. "It won't fix everything, but it should give us enough local stability to work with. Though we might want to wear name tags. Temporal displacement has a way of making pronouns really complicated." As if to demonstrate her point, 3 different versions of Chen suddenly appeared, each from a different point in the conversation. They nodded to each other and immediately began comparing notes. "Don't worry about them," the original Chen assured the increasingly distressed alien research team. "They'll synchronize back into normal causality once we get this sorted out. Though the one in the blue shirt is technically from next Thursday, we should probably take notes." Valera watched as the human scientists, both temporally local and displaced, began setting up their improvised equipment. Their approach to physics seemed to be a terrifying combination of advanced theoretical understanding and what they called winging it. "This defies all known laws of physics," Zix 427 observed as Chen calibrated her device, using what appeared to be a novelty snow globe and a half-eaten sandwich. "Oh, the laws still work," Chen assured them, while her future self used the sandwich to calculate quantum trajectories. "We just find they're more like guidelines, really. Reality is pretty flexible, if you ask nicely. Though sometimes you have to fill out paperwork in 11 dimensions." The probability storm was intensifying. Through the ship's viewports, they could see Earth itself beginning to blur as multiple quantum states tried to occupy the same space-time coordinates. Valera had a sinking feeling that humanity's solution to this crisis would either save them all or create an even bigger problem. Knowing humans, she suspected it would somehow manage to do both. The situation aboard the Eternal Curiosity had evolved from concerning to bizarre. Reality was unraveling around them in increasingly creative ways, and Valera was watching 3 versions of Dr. Chen argue with each other about the proper way to reverse a quantum apocalypse. "The sandwich-based calculations clearly show we need to increase the temporal flux," insisted Thursday Chen, waving half of what had become the most important sandwich in multiple timelines. "But the coffee cup readings suggest a more subtle approach," countered current Chen, whose coffee now existed in a quantum superposition of every possible beverage simultaneously. "You're both wrong," declared future Chen, who was covered in what looked like temporal soot. "Trust me, I already tried those solutions. That's why I'm covered in quantum residue from explosion that hasn't happened yet." Valera's tentacles twisted in knots as she tried to follow the conversation. Perhaps we should evacuate before reality completely breaks down. Oh, it's far too late for that, all three Chen said in perfect unison, then glanced at each other in surprise. Interesting temporal harmonic, they added, again in sync. Zix 427, whose crystalline form had begun to express impossible geometries, chimed in distress. Our sensors are detecting a complete collapse of causality approaching. Time itself is becoming recursive. As if to prove his point, a future version of the eternal curiosity briefly phased through its present self, its hull now apparently made of sentient jazz music. The resulting temporal feedback loop caused several nearby minutes to tie themselves into a pretzel. That's it, Current Chen suddenly exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with the kind of inspiration that Valera had learned to fear. We're thinking about this all wrong. We don't need to stop the temporal cascade. We need to complete it. Of course. Future Chen slapped her forehead, causing temporal soot to rain upward. It's like a quantum phase transition. The system has to get worse before it can get better. Like that time at the particle accelerator, Thursday Chen nodded sagely. When we accidentally created a consciousness singularity and had to feed it philosophy textbooks until it got bored and collapsed back into normal spacetime, Current Chen finished. Exactly. Valera watched in mounting horror as the humans began reprogramming their quantum stability anchor. Their solution, as far as she could follow it, seemed to involve deliberately making the situation worse in a very specific way. You want to accelerate the breakdown of reality. Care's gelatinous form had started to blur across multiple probability states, making him look like an abstract painting of himself. Think of it like a fever, Current Chen explained, while attaching what appeared to be a rubber duck to their quantum device. Sometimes the system needs to spike before it can reset. We just need to push the temporal cascade past its critical point, and reality will have no choice but to reconstruct itself. All three Chens finished together. That's completely insane, Valera protested, even as her own tentacles began to exist at different points in history simultaneously. Exactly. Thursday Chen beamed. That's why it'll work. Reality has built-in safeguards against this kind of thing. Like an immune system, we just need to trigger it. The modified quantum stability anchor now looked like something assembled by a mad scientist with a fever dream and access to a thrift store. In addition to the rubber duck, it incorporated a lava lamp, 3 paper clips, something called a Tamagotchi, and what Valera strongly suspected was an actual piece of space-time folded into an origami crane. Ready? Current Chen asked, her hand hovering over what looked suspiciously like a garage door opener taped to the device. Wait. Valera's tentacles waved in panic. Shouldn't we run some simulations first? Oh, the simulation programs all achieved sentience and eloped with our debugging software, Future Chen said casually. Besides, this is the kind of thing you have to do by feel. Before anyone could object further, she pressed the button. Reality held its breath for a moment. And then, everything happened at once. And then nothing happened at all. And then everything happened again, but sideways. Valera experienced the entire history of the universe in reverse, followed by a brief period as a quantum superposition of every possible cup of tea, before snapping back to what appeared to be normal spacetime. The only evidence that anything had happened at all was a slight smell of toasted mathematics in the air. See, Current Chen said triumphantly, now the only Chen present. Simple physics. Well, complex physics made simple through aggressive application of improbability. The alien research team stared at their sensors, which were now showing completely normal readings. Somehow, the humans had saved them all by deliberately making things worse in exactly the right way. This, Valera said slowly, her tentacles finally untangling themselves from their temporal knots, is going to make for a very interesting report to the Galactic Council. Oh, speaking of reports. Chen pulled out her tablet, which had somehow acquired sentience during the crisis, but was now back to normal. Would you mind peer reviewing a paper we're writing about this? We're thinking of calling it temporal crisis resolution through applied chaos theory and creative kitchen appliance repurposing. Valera had a feeling this was going to fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed both humans and the nature of reality itself. She just wasn't sure which was more terrifying. 1 month after the temporal incident, Valera stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session, her tentacles carefully arranged in what her species considered a professional posture. The vast chamber was filled with representatives from every major spacefaring civilization, all gathered to hear her report on humanity. The council chamber's quantum displays were showing footage from the incident, though the recordings had a tendency to occasionally transform into interpretive dance performances about the nature of causality. Distinguished council members, Valera began, her bioluminescence pulsing steadily. I am here to recommend an immediate reclassification of humanity. Not as a quarantine species as originally considered, but as something else entirely. A murmur rippled through the assembled beings. Reclassification was rare enough, but to completely reverse the original assessment. The humans, Valera continued, are neither unstable nor dangerous in the way we initially suspected. They are something far more interesting. They are actively incomprehensible by design. She gestured to one of the displays, which showed Dr. Chen using a coffee maker, 3 rubber bands, and what appeared to be a broken toaster to stabilize a quantum singularity. Their approach to physics isn't wrong, as we first thought. It's simply that they've developed their understanding of the universe through a unique lens of determined improvisation and creative problem-solving that makes perfect sense to them, and only them. Zix 427, now serving as her assistant, brought up another display showing various human scientific achievements. They don't just think outside the box, he chimed in. They question why the box exists, fold it into a new shape, and then use it to build something that shouldn't be possible. For example, Valera continued, during our mission, we discovered that humans had already achieved quantum tunneling, faster than light travel, and temporal manipulation, not through careful, methodical research as we would have done, but through what they call trying stuff to see what happens. The council chamber erupted in shocked discourse. A representative from the Rigelian Science Academy rose to object, but their official technological level is barely above planetary. Yes, Valera's tentacles waved in what had become an unconscious imitation of human gesturing, because they don't consider most of these achievements significant enough to formally document. Dr. Chen's team accidentally created a stable temporal loop last year, and their primary concern was that it made them late for lunch. She brought up another display, this one showing various human research facilities. Their scientists regularly discover fundamental forces of nature through what they call happy accidents. They solve complex quantum equations by dropping their calculators and studying the pattern of the scattered pieces. They achieve breakthrough propulsion technologies because someone misread an equation and decided to try it anyway. Kerr, who had joined the presentation team, wobbled forward. We've had to create an entirely new classification system just to categorize their scientific methodology. We're calling it structured chaos theory, though the humans just call it messing around and finding out. The council chamber had grown very quiet. Valera could see the implications sinking in across the assembled representatives. Humanity wasn't a threat to galactic stability. They were its unwitting custodians, regularly saving reality from itself through methods that defied explanation. Furthermore, she continued, we've discovered that what we thought were dangerous instabilities in their nature are actually sophisticated adaptation mechanisms. They don't just survive chaos. They thrive in it. They don't just adapt to problems. They redesign the problems themselves. She gestured to her final piece of evidence, a simple coffee cup from the Eternal Curiosity's replicator. During the temporal crisis, Dr. Chen used this cup of coffee to calculate 11-dimensional space-time coordinates. When we asked her how, she said she noticed an interesting pattern in the cream swirls. We still haven't figured out how it worked, but our best mathematicians agree that her calculations were perfect. So what exactly are you proposing? The council chief asked, their metaphysical form flickering with interest. I propose we create a new classification entirely, chaos shepherds. A species that doesn't just survive in chaos, but actively maintains universal stability through controlled applications of creative instability. In other words, humanity doesn't need to be contained. They're already containing themselves, and by extension, helping to stabilize the entire universe. She activated her final display, showing Dr. Chen's latest research paper, Quantum Stability Through Applied Improbability, a coffee-based approach to universal harmony. The paper has already been peer-reviewed, Valera noted, though 3 of the reviewers achieved enlightenment trying to understand the methodology section, and 1 became temporarily omniscient before requesting a transfer to the Department of Temporal Mathematics. As the council digested this information, Valera delivered her final recommendation. We should not only lift all consideration of quarantine, but actively seek to integrate human scientific perspectives into our own research. Their chaos may be incomprehensible, but it's a vital part of how the universe maintains its balance. And if we don't, someone asked from the back of the chamber, then we risk missing out on countless discoveries simply because we're too afraid of their methods. As Dr. Chen told me, sometimes you have to break reality a little bit to figure out how it really works. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Valera noticed that several of the more conservative members seemed to be having existential crises, while others were already drafting research exchange proposals. As the debate raged on, her personal communicator chimed with a message from Earth. It was from Dr. Chen. Hey, we just accidentally invented a new form of mathematics while trying to fix the office coffee maker. Want to help us figure out what it does? Fair warning. The equations taste like mint. Valera found herself doing something very human. She smiled. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place.